Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the next in our series of Agency Masters. Today, we are looking at all things to do with agency pipeline, which I know is a bit of a hot topic. Before we jump in, for those who don't know me or haven't joined before, I'm Steve. I'm one of the co-founders here at the Agency Works. I've been working with agencies for over 22 years now, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleague Kate, who is a principal consultant here at the Agency Works, but is also has a previous life working in client services and operations, Kate.
Indeed, yeah, that's me.
At agencies beforehand, so we'll have come across this before in her time there. So this morning's topic, as I mentioned, is very much in my wheelhouse. It's a key challenge that I know from speaking to a lot of our agency clients and attending networking events. It's pretty much the key challenge that agencies are facing at the moment. So we know that it's hard out there. We know that agencies are struggling with existing clients and getting them to commit to budgets, always having to find new revenue each month as there's no commitment to kind of longer term projects. So there's a lot of big focus on winning new business and managing pipeline. So whether it's having enough new business in your pipeline or perhaps too much of the wrong type of work in your forecast, or maybe that it's just around decisions that are taking much longer and you find yourself being ghosted. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we won't keep you long, we'll be looking at how you identify initially the targets that you should be going after, how to find them, once you found them, how to open the door, if there's such a thing as the perfect pitch, what your clients are looking for, how to hopefully avoid being ghosted, which is a big issue, how to become a strategic partner, and at the end of it, how we look to analyze our performance and to make improvements moving forward.
Absolutely. So when identifying new clients, how do you find out who your target audience is? Because there we go, newsflash, big newsflash. Big doesn't always mean best. And thinking back to my agency days, pitching for the bigger, more lucrative clients often meant that existing clients' work got pushed back or rushed as a result of getting the pitch out of the door. And then what if you win the pitch? Hopefully you do. But does that mean that your current clients are going to carry on suffering as all your resources are picking up the nice, new, shiny work? In the current climate, growing existing clients could be a better option. Or if you want to be looking at new biz as well, why not start by reviewing which clients are most profitable now? Which type of clients are they? How did you find them? And looking at this data will help you find clients who will actually be a good fit for your agency culturally. And there won't be a drain on your resources, time, or steal time from existing projects. So maybe having a few smaller, more sort of fit to your agency clients is better than having one larger one.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. Before we start to look at managing pipeline, I think it starts a bit earlier. We need to initially identify who those ideal clients are. So we've got this graphic here, and the idea of the quadrants is to help you plot who you should be targeting. Now, in our quadrants, we've broken this down between treasures, develops, manage, and avoids. I mean, I've seen them called different things. The idea is that we should ideally be aiming to the top right. Clients in this quadrant are the ones that are going to stay the longest, they're the most easiest to acquire, and therefore we should focus all of our time and our efforts in getting these what we call treasures. As Kate mentioned previously, we all want big clients, but big isn't always better. There's no point focusing all our efforts on trying to land massive accounts if you haven't got the creds, or you've got no case studies, or you've got no kind of track record of working within their industry or in their marketplace. They're going to be hard to acquire. They're probably going to lead to a change in your agency process. They're going to take ages to close, and there's definitely no guarantee of future revenue. And I think Kate's got a story about that in a sec. So they might not be in your treasure quadrant, but maybe more in your managed quadrants. So yes, they could be profitable, they could be sticky, but they're going to be really hard work. Therefore, it might make much more sense to aim for your sweet spot for clients that you've worked with or types of clients you worked with before. They're easy to acquire. And as Kate said, getting a couple of these may actually provide the same amount of profit as trying to aim for one big client account. And then finally, makes sense. The ones that are in the bottom left quadrant are the ones that are really hard to acquire. They aren't going to spend any money. They're going to waste your time. So simply just ignore and avoid them. Okay, so once we've identified who we should be targeting, how do we find them? Or more importantly, how do they find you? And I say that because according to a recent Up to the Lights report on what clients think, 85% of clients like to feel they've discovered a new agency rather than being sold to. So we need to forget the whole scattergun approach of advertising, cold outreach emails, hoping that something sticks, because rarely that will bring your perfect client to your door. What we need to do is have them, or us, open the door for them. And opening the door is about a much more carefully crafted, bespoke approach. And we break this down into 4 simple questions: the where, the what, the how, the why. And the where is very much around, where do your treasures, where's your sweet spot? How do you find them? Will it be at industry specific conferences or networking events? Is it online, publications? Or are you going to rely on referrals and partnerships? Once you found them, what will they be interested in seeing or hearing about? So this could be very much about proven results that you've had with similar businesses, or maybe case studies that you've got that you can provide. They'll also obviously expect you to have a clear understanding of their business and industry, or maybe you have a custom solution or strategy that you can offer them that sets you apart from other agencies that they're speaking to. Once you've done that, we need to work out how we get in front of them. So getting in front of clients without relying on cold calls, which we know 90% of clients dislike, does require a much more strategic approach. And this will depend on the previous point of where you find those ideal clients hang out. For example, if your clients aren't on LinkedIn, or you're not connected to them on LinkedIn, there's not a lot putting a lot of content out on there if they're not going to see it. Likewise, doing public speaking, if they're not going to be at that event, what's the point of spending your time and effort there? So we find the most effective way to get in front of potential clients is definitely through warm introductions from existing clients, partners, or mutual contacts. And then finally, the why. Why would they want to speak to you? Well, typically, they find that there may be a need for your expertise that they don't have themselves in-house. So digital marketing, branding, website development, whatever it might be. It could be just a simple need for fresh ideas, or simply to improve results working with a longer-term strategic partner. But it's about agencies becoming more value partners, showing how you can help businesses solve their challenge and hopefully achieve their goals.
And there was an interesting statistic in that report that you mentioned there, what clients think. And it's that clients will get 8 new business approaches every day. And when I first read that, I thought that can't be true. It must mean every week, but it isn't. It's every day. But I guess that makes sense with the blanket emails and scattergun approach that you mentioned earlier, Steve. So how do you stand out from all that noise? And what is your perfect pitch? Now, obviously, this isn't the only method, but it's something that my marketing director shared with me, and it's a way to help your agency stand out. Because if you go in with a generic service pitch, you're not going to get through, and you need to show them the value that you can deliver. So, for example, if you were a branding agency targeting a startup SaaS business, and your point of difference was that you create people-focused brands, you might use a point of view like, SaaS brands we've worked with have struggled to stand out with product-based branding. And then you could drop in an alternative, like you could go down the purpose-based approach. But then what you want to do is drop in that perfect world. So, but when you're a startup, what makes you special is your people, right? Now you can introduce you as, we create people-focused brands. And that's the value that they're going to get from working with you. Then you just share your relevant proof, like maybe case studies, discuss any objectives with the client, And then after you've done that, all you have to do simply is ask for the project. Quite easy, isn't it, Steve, really, when
Simple.
when you look like that? Don't know what everyone's going on about. But remember, for a client, it's a risk choosing a new agency. So these are some of the key things that they'll be looking for. So the first one there is competency. So can you do the job? Do you have the expertise and the experience to deliver the requirements? Can you demonstrate that you can deliver and you're a safe pair of hands? Credibility. Have you got the evidence? Case studies, recommendations, all around that sort of type of work that you're expecting to deliver. Maybe you've even got some nice shiny awards that you've paid for very expensive tables for, the ones. And chemistry, you've employed people because you like them and you thought that they could do a good job. So it's about making sure your client feels the same way about your people. So it's important to help them practice and feel confident and authentic when they deliver a pitch. And that way the clients are going to trust them as well. So you've opened the door, you've got the perfect pitch, you know what the client wants, but typically a client can take up to 1.5 years to appoint a new agency. So that's a long time. And obviously in that time, the client needs to do their due diligence, etc. But in the current climate, maybe they're more wary of making a decision, which can lead them to ghosting you, which obviously, Steve, you know nothing about and you never experienced that.
Never happens to me. No, not what you're talking about. But it definitely is, speaking to agencies, I think I mentioned at the start, the idea of being ghosted or decisions not being made is not so much kind of losing opportunities as not decisions being made. And that kind of has an impact on agencies managing forecasts for capacity and resourcing and everything else. But it definitely is a big issue. I think avoiding being kind of ghosted after a pitch does rely on you being in control of the sales process and setting clear expectations and having kind of more open communication. We've put some tips together. I would advise anybody who's interested in this section to look at our YouTube channel, and Jay did an A game with Justin Stevenson from a company called Sandler, who specialize in this. And I think a lot of this is to do with the whole topic is often with agencies not having the right people or not having trained your people to do this properly. So we're asking people, not the account managers, account directors, client services teams, to do the sales process, to manage this, but they haven't had the right training. Again, there is an A game on our YouTube channel with a company called Sandler, who, if you're interested in picking that up, but definitely worth speaking to those guys. But what we've done here is we've taken some ideas. You're not going to avoid ghosting completely, but here hopefully are some tips, techniques that you could employ that will hopefully prevent that in the future. So the first thing is around about establishing an agreement, and that's you and the client. Well, what's going to happen next? It sounds simple, but it's basically about setting up a clear framework on your follow-up procedures. So what's going to happen in terms of timelines, the client's commitment to the decision-making process. So you both need to be aligned on what to expect after the meeting, which hopefully will reduce the likelihood of you being ghosted. This next one is a really simple technique, but works really, really well. And you think, why doesn't it happen all the time? But basically, it's about asking at the start of the meeting and saying, right, can we agree on a time to reconnect, even if the answer's yes or no? So what we're doing is, before we leave the initial meeting, is getting the next meeting booked up. And you've got miles more chance of speaking to your client if you've got a pre-agreed meeting in the calendar. Something that salespeople absolutely hate, hearing that dreaded word no, but rather than pushing for a hard yes, we need to give your client permission to say no. And by that, what I mean is you can say something like, if this doesn't seem to be like the right fit, feel free to tell me. It's okay if you decide that we aren't the best fit for your company. So that is then creating more of a safe space for your client to express any concerns or hesitations early on and while you're having that conversation with you. If you can get that feedback or uncover those hidden objections, you've got much more a chance to address them directly. And again, that will reduce the chances of being ghosted later on. On a similar vein, at the end of the pitch, ensure that your client knows what's going to happen next. So you could say something like, assuming this makes sense, what does your decision-making process look like? Again, it sounds simple, but you're just asking the right questions. Understand their timing, understand the involvement of the other stakeholders in the decision-making unit. Don't leave it to your client to reach out. You need to agree on a specific time for the next communication, and then obviously take ownership of the follow-up. Next thing is like we call temperature checks. So most clients surveyed when we looked at that report wanted the pitch process to be much more of a discussion than a pitch. So you presented, but you've literally got no idea what they're thinking. Again, sounds obvious. Why don't we ask them? Get them to provide live feedback. What are their initial thoughts? We call it kind of blowing up the bombs. It's about anything that's going to derail this process a bit further down the line. We may as well ask now. So if they've got any objections, they've got any concerns, we may as well ask them. We may as well deal with them at that point. This goes back to stuff we've covered in a previous webinar around about kind of a questioning and asking kind of why 5 times, but it's about uncovering, the real objections, again, probably at the time. Asking directly, is there anything that could prevent this from not moving forward? Is there anything we haven't covered that might hold up the project? So that, again, will encourage them to voice objections without them disappearing later on. We need to address things like price, budget, internal issues, and don't shy away from talking about things like internal process and decision making. Yeah, follow up. If you have been ghosted, because that does happen, you might have booked a meeting from a previous meeting, they may not have turned up for whatever reason, then you're in that dreaded kind of chase up stage, which we all hate. So you need to remember to follow up. They have a need. They've potentially approached you, so don't be afraid to follow them up. You never know that your email might absolutely land at the right time. But on that point, it might be that you change channel as well. If you're constantly emailing them, it might end up in their hundreds of other open emails. So perhaps think about a different channel approach. So perhaps a simple message on LinkedIn, or you may want to pick the phone up. So it's not a cold call, but again, a direct call might be easier than just sending them or bombarding them with hundreds of emails. And then finally, help them buy. It's not about selling. We need to stop selling to clients. What we need to be is allowing them to make a decision to buy from us. And that is around nurturing them. So once we've done the pitch, how can we help them buy? How can we help support their internal sales process? How can we support their ROI case? That could be through case studies, it could be through articles, testimonials, anything that you think could help support your proposal. So it isn't just around follow-up calls and next actions, it's around supporting them to make that buying decision. So hopefully we're not going to avoid ghosting altogether, but hopefully some of those techniques might help you do that. As I said, the guys at Sandler are great at managing that process. If you want to reach out to them, we've got their details.
Yeah, some really excellent techniques there. Steve could do a webinar on that in itself, I think. It's like so much content there. But of course, new business doesn't stop after the pitch. It's when it just really, in my opinion, the hard work really gets going then. And I've got a bit of an example for you from a very good friend of mine who works for an agency, and they were pitching for some boots work, so a big brand. And the pitch took about 6 months to win. They had like £2 million in the pipeline. So, it was big. They won it. They made a big announcement about it. They did the first 2K project, and then they never heard from Boots again. So, it's what I want to talk about now is kind of how you take it from doing that first project and where you're more of a supplier and you're getting to know one another, to becoming like that strategic partner that we like to mention in every webinar. Mm-hmm. And I've got some sort of key points to run through just quickly to help do that. So the first one being building the relationship. So, this all sounds like obvious stuff, but making sure you're being responsive. The clients want to feel valued and important. Listen to them and really understand any briefs that you get and all the nuances for their business. And go above expectations. So you're only as good as your last project. So make sure you're delivering amazing work and services on time and on budget. hopefully not out of scope or keeping it in scope. But if you do, make sure that you are not secretly free, you're strategically free. So make sure you tell them. And taking the workload off the client. So clients, in some of the reports that I've read, they often talk about the difference between efficient but passive management and truly being on top of everything. So chasing things and really owning the project. So ultimately taking the pressure and the workload off the client. Regular check-ins, I mean, come on, that's an obvious one, isn't it? But maybe you can get your agency leaders to join a few of those calls and meetings to show that you're continuing to providing strategic oversight. And as well as those check-ins, schedule proactive meetings to discuss any further needs. You know, that way you're really making the work. And lastly, but not least, don't forget about your post-project reviews. So, you know, make sure you get those calls in with the clients, let them tell you what you've done well, so you can tell your team how ace they are. But also, you know, what perhaps they expected that you didn't deliver, anything that wasn't quite right. And then you can feed that back into your team as well. So that's always, you know, always growing that client relationship.
Yeah, good point, sir. I think, and then once you've won that relationship and you are developing the relationship with the client, thing we'd look at then at the end of the process, if you've been through all that, is actually looking at kind of your win-loss analysis, because it can give you some good insights. So knowing why you win, or perhaps more importantly, why you lose, can definitely help provide invaluable insights. And it's not about finger pointing, but learning how to improve your process, refine your proposition, and ultimately close more deals. So the kind of things that we tend to look at would include things like your simple win-loss reasons. You know, what are the reasons you've either won some work or lost? Was it price? Was it creativity? Was it competition? What are the lessons we can learn from next time? Also, when we go back to what I talked about before in terms of managing the sales process, asking your client permission for a post-sale interview. Now, that's whether you've won the business or not. It allows you then to get some really valuable insight. So if we've won it, great, I'm interested in what we did well. If we've lost it, again, hopefully your client, if they pre-agreed, will give you some feedback, which you can take. And again, going back to that point of what we've done well, what we can improve. And then once you've got that, it's about sharing those with the team. So don't keep that information to yourself. We need to say, right, okay, if we've identified a training issue, then again, that needs to be addressed because we want to improve continually. And again, it's not just about things we've lost, it's also about the things that we do well, and we can build on that. And then finally, it's what we call track investment. Not every agency does this, but are you actually recording time and costs during the sales process? So can you report the amount of time and money it does take you to either win or, more importantly, lose an opportunity? If you can, then is there any chance that we can recoup this investment back on future projects with the client? But also as well, when you're looking at your loss reasons, how much time are we spending not winning opportunities? Is it based on certain types of jobs? Is it based on certain types of clients? But again, it's all really valuable insight. As we do with every webinar, we like to leave you with 3 key takeaways, and we've got them here. The first one I would say is going back to targeting. So before we look at pipeline, it is actually spending your time doing that quadrant, picking out who are your treasures. It might be by revenue size, it might be by number of employees, it might be by sector, but actually identifying who you're going after and where it's worth spending your time. And you've got more chance of winning than perhaps the ones that are in the bottom quadrant.
Absolutely. And the second one there, work the relationship. So by being responsive, driving your projects forward, sharing ideas, and just becoming that strategic partner that your client will really appreciate.
And then finally, don't forget your existing clients. So if your client does see that you're growing and you're doing well, they'll obviously be pleased. But if you become stretched and they start to suffer, any issues that you might have could be blamed on the fact that your focus is perhaps a bit more on the new business side and not your existing. So obviously important not to forget your existing clients as well as managing your pipeline. So Time's flown. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed it as usual. The recording will be sent out for you to share with any of your colleagues who perhaps haven't attended, or those people who haven't attended live. It will also be put onto our YouTube channel, which I've mentioned previously, which alongside Agency Masters webinars, we also have the A games that Jay does as well, which you might find of interest. There's also plenty of content on our website. Any other questions, feel free to reach out to us either on LinkedIn or on the information on screen. We do have another webinar approaching in October. I think it's the end of October, I think. Is it 30th? And that's to do with building a more commercial culture within your agency. So we'll send you details of that. But thanks ever so much for joining us. Thanks, Kate, for joining me once again.
you.
Hope you have a great day and see you all soon.
Bye.